Red herrings are often referred to as plot devices in detective and investigative stories that are referred to as sort of story beats where our investigator are being misled or distracted off the main case and they're sort of on a wild goose chase. But did you know that this reference actually goes back to the English Renaissance scene, and today we'll be connecting it to the Shakespeare authorship question.
Welcome, folks. Gonna come at you with a quick one today. Gonna do a little blitz edition, stealing the words of Dan Carlin. If you guys are familiar with the classic history podcast that's been around for a decade plus, gonna try and come at you a little quicker, hitting one specific idea. Not gonna go too much into the weeds about who is or isn't Shakespeare, but as Brady said, there may be a big clue to lead us down the road to find who is Shakespeare, and not just that, maybe make heads or tails of a lot of the scene that is happening circa maybe 92 through 95, 96, when all those university wits guys are disappearing and Shakespeare pops on the scene. So, Red Herring, I don't know if you ever watched, what was, not Scooby-Doo, but what was the bad Scooby-Doo spinoff? It was like Scooby-Doo Kids or Scooby-Doo Junior or something. It was on Cartoon Network early in the mornings for little kids, but they literally had a character that Fred would always try and nab him at the start, and like, this is the guy that did it, and it's this redheaded kid, and his name was Red Herring. And so, Red Herring,
There you go.
and of course, Red Herring never is actually the guy. It's always some other, actual adult dude. It's not some other kid, and because it's all like the Scooby-Doo gang when they're kids, right?
Okay.
So like Red Herring, it's this false sense of, I think that's what the thing is. Well, herring is all over this Renaissance period, specifically Nash, Green, but this may actually relate to the Henry IV plays. This may relate to Sir John Oldcastle. Yeah, Sir John Oldcastle. Why would this relate to Sir John Oldcastle? We're talking about red herrings. You're talking about Scooby-Doo. What kind of circus is this? Well, let's see. Can we pull up our featured essay of the day here?
And so, yeah, what is the name of our essay that we're going to be pulling up?
The name of our essay is called Nash, Johnson, and the Oldcastle Problem by Alice Lyle Scoffus. Probably butchered that, but she's a Shakespeare scholar around in the 50s, 60s, 70s, something like that, maybe 80s as well. And this is her doing a little deep dive into the use of red herring, specifically as a phrase in this Elizabethan era, and it seems to be popping up big time with Thomas Nash and Benjamin Johnson, but maybe not just them, maybe some others as well, like Robert Greene and others, that this may be a pot shot at Lord Cobham. Well, who's Lord Cobham? Lord Cobham is a guy named William Brooke. William Brooke is a pretty powerful man in England. He is, Lord Cobham, so he's not quite an earl, but he is pretty high up in the totem pole in the ladder there. His son-in-law becomes Robert Cecil, the son of William Cecil. His son is best buddies with Walter Raleigh. But he himself seems to be sort of antagonistically set against this crowd, at least such as the interpretation that Alice Lyle Scoffus is going to give us, and plenty of other people have pointed this out, that there is some weird overlap with Lord Cobham and the Shakespeare plays. So if we, that's going to be some later guy. But yeah, if we look at, say, Henry IV, right? Henry IV, who's the best, most awesome, famous character, the best Shakespeare character ever. It's Falstaff, right? Sir John Falstaff. Well, maybe many of you are in the know and know that Falstaff's not always Falstaff. The greatest Shakespeare character ever was actually like a rewrite in a sense, because his original name was Sir John Oldcastle, which Sir John Oldcastle is a real actual dude. Sir John Falstaff is not a real actual dude. Sir John Oldcastle was a guy from the late 1300s, or maybe mid to late 1300s. He was what was called a Lollard, and he became a Lollard martyr. But a Lollard is somebody that followed John Lollard or John Lollardy, and it was basically like a proto Protestant. Protestantism doesn't really actually come around till Luther in 1518 or whenever. But yeah, Lollard, it's the same idea, and it's this guy in England that's trying to start his own breaking away from the Catholic Church. And so this whole Protestant thing, it makes sense that it takes over England. The whole Anglican Church thing makes sense. Like, England is naturally going to be one of the first to break away from the Catholic Church. That's like ingrained in the culture for whatever reason. But this Sir John Oldcastle, he was a Lollard martyr because, yeah, when he was finally taken in by the king and then by the Pope, like, he was burnt alive at the stake. And so apparently his character in real life was supposed to be this actual brave dude, right? But if you go read Henry IV, what is the Falstaff or Oldcastle character? He's not a brave dude. He's he's clumsy. He's a boaster, a braggart. He's ridiculous. He's a coward. But like at the same time, he is like the best Shakespeare character ever. So like, one of our commenters, 6 Days Theater, I've been talking with him lately, and he made a comment that, like, yeah, can we really get that bent out of shape about the Falstaff character?
He's
like,
so endearing, like,
yeah, why?
It's like,
why would you be so bent out of shape? And so, if you don't look too deeply, it's like, oh, it must be Sir John Oldcastle's like great grandkids that are really pissed off that their poor dad was already, or poor great granddad was already burnt at the stake, and now you're mistelling his life. But no, the guy that got mad is this Lord Cobham William Brooke guy. And he is not related at all to Sir John Oldcastle. And so it's like, what's the beef? Well, you know what Sir John Oldcastle's title was? It was Lord Cobham. And so even though they're not literally genetically related, they are titularly related in that they both held the same, title. They're both Lord of Cobham. And so at some point it's like, okay, but why would this piss you off still? Well, basically what Alice is going to get at here is that Falstaff maybe isn't a rewriting of the Sir John Oldcastle character. Falstaff is a writing of William Brooke into the play. I don't know that that's actually 100% a representation of William Brooke, but maybe William Brooke saw it as something close to that, and there was part of that totally offended him. Maybe it was an absolute caricature of himself, and he's trying not to have this image, or who knows. But let's see where Alice comes up with all this. So this is a few pages into her essay. She says at the top left here, in my research, I have found such extensions in Thomas Nash's Lenten Stuffe, or Praise of the Red Herring, and in Ben Jonson's Every Man His Humour. These satiric attacks, which appear to be directed at Lord Cobham, were provoked, it would seem, by the harsh treatment meted out to the two playwrights for their seditious play, The Isle of Dogs. The drama is no longer extant, but I think we can assume from the backlash of satire, which followed its censorship, that the Cobhams were touched in the slanderous play. About all we know concerning the Isle of Dogs is that sometime shortly before the 28th of July, in the summer of 1597, one acting company, possibly the Lord Chamberlain's, performed a lewd play containing very seditious and slanderous matter, in one of the theatres of the bank side of the Thames. The Privy Council ordered the arrest of the players, and the authorities were successful in apprehending 3 men. And, of course, from this, this is the disappearance of Thomas Nash. Nobody ever sees Thomas Nash ever again. And yeah, she says at the bottom here, Nash, if we can believe his story, fled to Yarmouth. And so like everybody doubts Nash. Not even it's not just crazy fringe Shakespeare, wackadoo internet
Yeah, I've
theorists like
seen other
us.
people online when they. I just went to go look up a general analysis of some of Nash's work, and like even there, like he was a real guy. He did real things. Why do people have to do this? Blah 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 blah. But we
And
encountered that so much.
sure, like
during the
maybe
scene.
he's a real guy or whatever, but like still so much of what his story is should be suspect. And like questioning if he's a real guy or not is taking that to maybe a logical extreme and maybe too far for some people, but Nash should be suspect for everybody at some level. And as Brady and I have been over and over and over continually bringing up, and I'm going to continue doing it, you should be kind of saying the same thing about Ben Johnson. And lo and behold, who's here co-writing with Nash? Ben Johnson. Why should we question Nash so hard and not Johnson? It's always been a little contention of mine. So I do want to give a little qualification or caveat. Alice is saying largely that so much of this is coming out of this Isle of Dogs thing. I want to say that this goes earlier and that this is just the first, that it's so openly, brazenly, out there that we're able to, spot it. Okay. Isle of Dogs comes out. It pisses off a lot of people, probably including Lord Cobham. Lord Cobham is one of the head guys that is part of the faction that gets all this stuff censored, and maybe has been for a while. That's maybe my take on it. But because of that, we're going to go and we're going to really stick it to him in several ways. And so you get, the Falstaff character. You get Nash's Lenten stuff. You get Ben Johnson attacking him and every man out of his humor. And so you're getting multiple three-sided attacks in 1597 by these three different guys. And so it's like, I can totally see why she's keying in on the Isle of Dogs. That said, I do want to say this goes earlier because, if we're going to be keying in on this term red herring here, let's remember, how does Robert Greene die?
He dies from eating bad fish?
Specifically, too much pickled herring.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Herring. It's a key word there. Like, literally kills Robert Greene.
And what's funny is that we've already kind of talked about the bizarre wordplay that you can kind of get from the names themselves. If you go back to the Nashe Dekker video, we kind of, riff on a lot of that stuff. Obviously a lot of it's speculative, but then
right.
It's funny because the herring thing is self-descriptive, but and then applied like in real time to a lot of it. So it's it's even more weird.
Yeah, this is a whole nother this is meta weirdness.
Yeah, exactly. A red herring is something that refers to a distraction, a way of don't look at the clues over here. You're out on that goose chase as we sort of hinted at earlier. But now but now it's like, oh, this guy ate a bunch of pickled herring, and especially now we're about to see that they have a lot of writings referring to that stuff. So it's just kind of strange how
it is itself a red. The red herring is a red herring, and wait, this isn't even supposed to be a term yet,
right? Yeah,
and this isn't even acknowledged fully either. This isn't something that everybody's like, yes, we know red herring, and we know that Greene didn't die of herring. Like, no, nobody actually says that. So yeah, there's like meta layer on meta layer. Yeah, it's not just weird. It's like WYRD weird.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
To invoke some of your.
There you go. Yeah, the weird web.
Yep.
All right. So here we go. Back to the essay.
Yeah. So let's skip on down. And so yeah, we get Mears is sympathetic to Nash's reference. As Actaeon was worried of his own hounds, so is Thomas Nash of his Isle of Dogs. Dogs for the death of Euripides, but be not disconsolate, gallant young Juvenal. Linus, the son of Apollo, died the same death. Yet God forbid that so brave a wit should basely perish. Thine are but paper dogs. Neither is thy banishment, like Ovid's, eternally to converse with the barbarous Getis. Therefore comfort thyself, sweet Tom. Cicero's glorious return to Rome, and with the counsel Aeneas gives to his sea-beaten soldiers. But not all Londoners felt this sympathy for the brash authors of the troublesome play. We do not know who among the council members advocated the sphere action against the players on July 28th. Henry, the new Lord Cobham, had not replaced his father on the council, but his brother-in-law, Sir Robert Cecil, was an important member of that group. I suspect that it was Henry Brooke, so this is Lord Cobham's son, the one that's buddies with Raleigh, that it was Henry Brooke who complained to Cecil or to Lord Burleigh that his complaint added considerable weight to the Lord Mayor's letter, for the Cobhams bear the brunt of Nash's satire on the great herring or cob, which was cooked before the Pope. Okay. And she's going to unpack this a little more, but just to give you a heads up, the great herring or cob that was cooked before the Pope is Sir John Oldcastle. And so red herring itself, when you smoke fish, what color does fish turn? Red. So if you ever smoke salmon or anything like that, it turns red. So you smoke herring, it turns red. Well, Sir John Oldcastle, how did he die? He died being burned at the stake. That said, I'm going to let her do a little closer analysis because my version of it's not super strong. She's going to point out that there's layers to this and that on multiple cases we can pinpoint this wordplay and it keeps coming back the same way. So in his introduction to Lenten Stuffe, Nash states that he means to put his enemy, the silliest miller's thumb, in brine and pickle him, and he does. Which, once again, not just herring that Robert Greene dies from. Robert Greene dies from pickled herring, and so we're getting this pickle metaphor stuff again. And pickle him, and he does. The allegory of Lenten Stuffe is built upon the wordplay involved in cob and miller's thumb as fish. A wordplay which Shakespearean scholars will recognize is that used by the young Countess of Southampton. Okay, this is Henry Wriothesley's wife. In her jesting remark about Sir John Falstaff in her letter to her husband in 1599. This letter, written at Chartley on the 8th of July and sent to the Earl in Ireland, apparently refers to Henry, Lord Cobham. All the news I can send you which I think will make you merry is that I read in a letter from London that Sir John Falstaff is by his Miss Dame pint pot made father to a godly miller's thumb, a boy that is all head and very little body, but this is very secret. Scholars have been quick to discover that the small fish with the big head, in Latin, is cotis gobio, and in English, a cob, or as early as 1440, a miller's thumb. So, cob, cotius gobio, which is the Latin word that we get cob from, and miller's thumb are all reference to the same fish. It's going to be the same kind of fish or very similar fish as a herring. The gossip which the Countess of Southampton repeats apparently credited the new Lord Cobham with parenthood, if we agree that the Cobhams were victimized by the character Falstaff. This is a murky milieu of small talk and illusion, but the thread of satire is worth pursuing. And I want to key in on this line because this mirrors what me and 6 Days are saying. It's like, is this really victimization? You know, are you really a victim of Falstaff? That said, like, clearly, like, being corroborated by a letter from Henry Wriothesley's wife that's totally outside the play, referencing Lord Cobham, or Henry Brooks, Lord Cobham Jr., I'll say, referencing Lord Cobham Jr. straight as Falstaff and saying Falstaff had a kid, well, that's pretty explicit, right? But let's see. For it leads to some explanation, I think, of Shakespeare's characterization of the gobos in The Merchant of Venice, as well as Nash's hidden attack on the Cobhams in Lenten Stuffe. The dramatis persona of The Merchant of Venice contains a clown, and his purblind old father are called Lancelot Gobbo and Old Gobbo. Yeah, that's Cobham and his dad. Or that's Cobham Jr. and Cobham Sr., William and Henry Brooke. The dramatis persona of The Merchant of Venice contains a clown and his purblind old father who are called Lancelot Gobbo and Old Gobbo. We can see, I think, in spite of the variant spelling of the name Gobbo, is part of the Latin name for cob or miller's thumb. Florio, here we go, folks. Shout out Giampaolo.
Get your bingo card out.
Yeah. No kidding. Floro, the Italian linguist who was residing with Southamptons in the 1590s, defines gobio in his famous dictionary, A World of Words. He lists the gobio, or gyoso, as a fish called gudgeon or a miller's thumb. And we know that the common English terms goby and black goby are derived from the Latin term gobio, the former denoting the small freshwater fish, the latter the sea gudgeon. It is in this tricky context that we must pursue Shakespeare's meaning. So hold on, I just real quick want to draw back and really take a pot shot at some Stratfordians right quick. And ironically, Alice is probably a Stratfordian herself, but why in God's name would anybody know this much about? This is beyond minutia about fish. This is absurd. This is anybody that knows this is not just a fisherman. They're somebody that studies fish at a marine biology university. Why would we know all these terms? Why would Shakespeare, the dramatic writer who comes from the Stratford town, know all these fish terms? And
it's once again, I always use Pynchon as this example because it's some of the best versions of how's a whole sentence a Wikipedia entry here, what's going on here. At least I can understand a modern Pynchon sense. It's it's got libraries, and sort of, there's a lot of internet that sort of coalescence of information that's available.
Not
but
internet, but
with Stratfordian biography, it's maybe some of the Latin, he went to Latin school, but then there's so many other disciplines that come on, people, be honest. There's only so much that any one person can attain. And for any reasonable Sure, I could be interested in multiple different subjects and dabble in them, but unless I'm kind of writing, there's only one reason why I'm even doing all this sort of extra branching. So I don't know. I'm already self-explaining maybe some of that stuff, but I don't know.
So I just wanted to this seems like minutia beyond minutia, but Alice is clearly right here, right? She's on to something, and it's not like she's solved the whole thing here, because it seems like she's the first that I've seen to point it out, and she's kind of saying the same as such, and that this may be strewn throughout. And clearly, she says it's not just Shakespeare, but strewn throughout Shakespeare, strewn throughout all our Henslow writers. This may be a way to define factionality if we think that there is an expanded authorship hypothesis and that we could have multiple pseudonymous writers,
Anemone.
Alonymic writers. There we go. Pseudonymic writers. There, we'll just say that. Pseudonymic writers. If we have that many different ones, we got Bacon, we got Oxford, we got Raleigh, are they all on the same team? Maybe at large, maybe this cohesive, if they're all part of some secret society or something, sure, they're all on the same team. But if they're not all on the same team, might we see some factionality? And for all intents and purposes, that has been sort of the narrative. That you get that with the pamphlet wars, and you get that with go earlier with
the theater of the wars,
the war of the theaters, and then between Johnson and Marston attacking each other, then Dekker coming in and attacking Johnson, and then if we go back to the early...
And there's also political faction stuff going on. We have this Essex rebellion happening. We have all these supposed coups going on.
Yeah, Essex is totally dead set against Cecil. Essex and Cecil hate each other. They're but there's a third
Catholics and Protestants.
There's a third guy that hates him. There's Walter Raleigh hates Essex, but Walter Raleigh maybe also hates Cecil, and the three of them are in this triangular tripartite thing that mirrors the generation before, where you had Walsingham and Leicester and Cecil Senior all vying for, let me get the Queen to do my idea of things, and it seems like what's sort of happening here. But if we can maybe go down this satiric line, we can maybe start to pinpoint, okay, whoever wrote this is not a fan of Henry Brooke. And if they're not a fan of Henry Brooke, likely not on either Cecil or Raleigh's side, because Cecil is Henry Brooke's brother-in-law, and Raleigh, once again, is supposed to be buddies with Henry Brooke. They both get arrested and basically, charged and imprisoned for life together until... I forget if Henry Brooke gets his head chopped off or not. Raleigh gets to live for a while. But I can't remember if Henry Brooke does or not.
I feel like it really is like a Sudoku game within another Sudoku game. Like if you can figure out some of this faction stuff,
Yeah.
then you can maybe start properly pairing it up with some of the other numbers going on with the stylistic stuff,
Yes.
and then going on with all the whatever other boxes you want to sort of metaphorize here. But so yeah, a lot of. Once again, yeah. So, how do the possible explanation of how anyone is so well versed in these explanations is good luck Stratfordians at this point. But obviously, we have. If you're outside of that Stratfordian sense, we feel like we have a lot to talk about here.
Right. Exactly. So the characters of Lancelot, Gobbo, and his father are minor ones, and neither the plot nor the dialogue gives a clue to topical identification, but modern editors have noted the possibility of contemporary allusions in the speeches of these characters. Sir Edmund Chambers, I think that's E.K. Chambers, has identified the role of Lancelot Gobbo as a satiric attack upon Sir Robert Cecil. Chambers uses evidence the remarks of young Francis Davison, which were included in a letter the young man wrote to his father in 1596. Davison was in Lucca at the time, but he was aware of the dissension between Essex, whom he sent news from the continent, and the Cecil faction, which was disrupting the harmony of Elizabeth's court. The elder Davison had hoped for preferment as a secretary after Walsingham's death, and Essex had pressed the suit, but Robert Cecil won the appointment. In his letter, Davison remarks upon Cecil's preferment and upon his misshapen back, the arch enemy quote, i.e., made like an arch. So a lot of Oxfordians have pointed out that, Robert Cecil had this. There's all these references to Robert Cecil having this like misshapen back, this lumpy back. Maybe he's just hunched like this. Like you've met people who just got kind of hunchy backs. But maybe it is like some Quasimodo. I have a hard time believing that it's totally Quasimodo. But at some point, Richard III in real life did not have some humped back. But now, forever on, for the rest of fucking time, this guy who was king of his country, he was a king, dude. And for the rest of time, he is going to be, likened to Quasimodo. And why is that? Well, it may just be because major shade's being thrown at Robert Cecil. And that's been a strong Oxfordian contention. That's part of that big bad Cecil. And when people say big bad Cecil, I think it gets a little mixed up between Cecil Senior and Cecil Junior. Because Cecil Senior, if he's a big bad, he's super smooth about it. And you're never gonna get to, it's very Dulles Brothers stuff. You're never gonna get to put him out on the, but Cecil Junior is not quite that. It's a little more open and he's kind of more aggressive about it, and albeit Richard III about it, so I could see that, but doesn't necessarily mean that Oxford wrote Richard III, right? Plenty of people in this scene are totally familiar with Robert Cecil, and it seems like unanimously everybody hates Cecil. I wouldn't be surprised if Henry Brooks yeah, dude, even I don't like that guy. I don't know why my sister married him. But yeah, so worlds colliding here, folks. And of course, Walsingham is me and Brady maybe our favorite power broker in all this, because from me and him, old Philip Sidney, he's working through Leicester and probably a pawn of Leicester for a long time. But if Philip Sidney is alive after 86, it is through the help of Francis Walsingham, and so I don't know. Brady and I want to believe that Francis Walsingham may be a super important figure in this whole Shakespearean scene. And even if we're wrong about the Philip Sidney thing, it's going on what a lot of Marlovians say. It's going on what a lot of Baconians say. And I don't know that Oxfordians would necessarily argue with that either. Walsingham is definitely super power broker, and he is the propaganda mind. He is the Machiavellian mind. So that said. Made like an arch. Then he speculates upon the possibility of Essex's fall. But if he be vanquished, and he being Davison, who was a secretary for Essex, but if he be vanquished, quod Deus omen avertat, without question all the world shall never make me confess, but that bombasted legs are a better fortification than bulwarks. and Saint Gobo, a far greater and more omnipotent saint than either Saint Philip or Saint Diego. And I wonder if Saint Philip's at all. If Saint Gobo's a reference to somebody else, why shouldn't Saint Philip or Saint Diego be a reference to somebody else? We don't have to search too far who would be Saint Philip. I don't know who Saint Diego would be. That's interesting. Maybe John D, but I don't think John D's dead at the time of this letter, so I don't know. The description of Cecil's hunchback and spindle legs seem obvious, as Chambers points out, but St. Gobo's is, I think, a reference to the martyred Lord Cobham, Sir John Oldcastle, who had undergone apotheosis at the hands of Tyndale, Bale, and Fox in the 16th century. Apotheosis, Brady and I were talking about this word the other day, that means to be, sanctified, be turned to a saint. We know that during Elizabeth's reign, William Cecil and William Brooke had been close friends. We also know that the friendship was strengthened in 1589 by the marriage of Sir Robert Cecil and Lord Cobham's eldest daughter, Elizabeth Henry Brooke. Lord Cobham's eldest son was deeply involved in the court quarrels. And so, yeah, I wonder how eligible Elizabeth Brooke Cobham must have been to marry Robert Cecil. Like, she must have had a similar hunchback. Like, nobody talks about Richardina III. But yeah. His malicious remarks to the Queen in 1596 concerning Essex and the Cadiz affair had prejudiced Elizabeth against the Earl, and the two men became violent enemies. So maybe before 96, there's still shade being thrown at each other, but after 96, right at this Isle of Dogs, Nash era, when Ben Johnson's popping on the scene, all our uni-wits guys are gone, everything explodes and is public because Essex has gone full Essex. Like, from here on out, Essex is on a freaking beeline to Icarus-type flame-out death. Like, and that's the narrative here, that from 96 onwards, like, Essex is just like, you're on the road to ruin, son. Like, but, like, he's going to change things. He's either going to change things or he's on the road to ruin. And, like, I can totally understand that. Like, it seems so weird, and, I wanted to believe that it was this forced narrative, but, like, after seeing all the stuff that's happening to all these 1550s courtiers, all these guys that are born in the 1550s, like Sidney, Oxford, Ferdinando Stanley, Anthony Bacon, like, none of those dudes, like, have successful lives. Like, their lives are all this, like, unbelievable, unbounding amount of potential, and then just crash, fizzle, tragedy. Like, no matter who. Like, Raleigh. Pick anybody born in the 1550s that's some courier-type dude. Nothing good happens. But, like, Essex, he's born right at the early 60s. Or mid-60s, even. He may have seen all that happen. And those guys just had to take disappointment. They just had to get told no by the Queen, or, take the big L. That wasn't real gold. That was fool's gold, Frobisher. Like, you just take the L, right? Nah, Essex watched all these dudes take L's for too long. For you older folks, take an L means take a loss. But he watched them take a loss for too many years. Grew up watching it. He thinks he's special. He thinks he's the guy that can finally get the thing. I'm going to make it happen. And it's just like, you have to push harder and harder and harder. And does he make it happen? No. He conceivably loses and gets his head cut off and blah, blah, blah. And that faction pops up around King James's son, Henry, and he dies, and that doesn't... But eventually the thing does happen, and it does become the Civil War. And, like, I want to say that this Civil War is coming out of this very, like courtier-type, angsty, angry courtier sentiment that's coming out of, this little Sydney Circle group, or not just Sydney Circle, but this Sydney Circle era group, people like Oxford as well. It bubbles into people like Cecil and people like Essex, who are like, if you ever watch Boardwalk Empire, like, the main character, Nucky Thompson, played by Steve Buscemi, he's a crazy freaking mobster, and he changes the game. But as crazy as he is, then he's still a guy that's born in, the 1880s. He's still part of that missionary generation. There's a whole nother generation of people coming after that, and it's called the Lost Generation, and it has people like Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, you know, real gangsters, like insane psychopathic people, and it's like people like Nucky Thompson are, and it has a little bit of that kind of flavor to it, to this historical narrative here, or this historical happenings here that, you know, these later guys, Cecil and Essex, they are crazy. They're fucking nuts, dude. You have to be. If not, you're broke like Oxford, or you're dead like Sydney, or you've become a laughing stock till you're imprisoned like Walter Raleigh. Like, it's not a good. It's none of this is working out, and the only people that it is working out for, it's only for so long, and then their time comes. You know, it's like, oh yeah, but you know, Henry Percy, he's doing well, and it's like, nah, dude, he was. His brother got his head cut off for the gunpowder plot. He gets locked up for a little bit himself. He's always being implicated along with Raleigh. He's always being implicated along with, like, this isn't good for anybody. And so I don't know, like that sort of lends into this whole Shakespeare scene may make more sense now. Like anybody that's totally dead set against aristocrats writing this plays, and you're like, when do they have the time? It's like, when do they not have the time? Like they have like not been able to do the things they want to do. Every time they ask for Elizabeth's like preferment in some merchant deal, nah, it's gonna go to this guy instead. Nah, it's gonna go to this guy. They don't have the time to go do the business thing because there is no business thing to do. They're just sitting on their hands. They're broke. They're tired. They're, you know. So I don't know. It makes sense to me that, like, what else? Why not? Especially if it's not just out of their own pure boredom, but if this is being headed by people like Walsingham and Leicester, under the noses of the Cecils, under the noses of Queen Elizabeth, saying, let's get this other kind of faction going.
I feel like there's something proto-American about a lot of this thought movement too, and obviously Bacon's writings can kind of, you know, be traced to some of that stuff or whatever. But
we can come back to it. There's not too much more to this, but we can read a little more here, and you guys should totally check this out yourself. My guess is that Shakespeare's characters, Lancelot Gobo and a stupid father, appear in The Merchant of Venice, satirize the contemporary Cobhams, William and Henry Brooke, and such satire is related, I think, to the Oldcastle allusions of the later Henry IV plays, which come out right after this, 97-98. Behind all this obfuscation may very well be the jockeying which occurred in the court for the Lord Chamberlain's post. Remember, who is Shakespeare writing for? The Lord Chamberlain's men. Okay. When Henry Carey, First Lord Hunsdon, I've never known how to say that, was near death in the summer of 1596, Lord Hunsdon died on the 23rd of July, and his white staff was given to William Brooke, Lord Cobham. The acting company former Lord Chamberlain had patronized his title became simply Lord Hunsdon's men under the sponsorship of George Carey, who succeeded his father to the baronage. There is extant a letter that Nash wrote to William Cotton sometime after Essex's return from Cadiz in August of 1596, which contains a reference to Lord Chamberlain's men and their having fallen upon evil days. In the letter, Nash speaks of his own strait circumstances, then remarks, when now the players, as if they had writ another Christ's tears, are piteously persecuted by the Lord Mayor and the aldermen, and however in their old lord's time they thought their state settled, it is now so uncertain they cannot build upon it. Lord Cobham's position on the Privy Council was important, but his appointment to the Lord Chamberlain's post gave him control of those sub-offices in the Queen's household, which included Mastership of the Revels, held by Sir Edmund Tilney at this time. And thus he had control over all the adult and children acting companies in London. I suspect that the uncertain state in which the players found themselves after Lord Hunsdon's death was increased by Lord Cobham's appointment to the Lord Chamberlain's position. Yeah, not just increased, but like, yeah, frying pan into the fire. Like the plane has crashed into the freaking mountain. However, since we know that Shakespeare's company returned to court from the provinces to present 6 performances at Whitehall during the Christmas festivities of 96-97, their piteous persecution seems not to have been unending. Moreover, we know that Lord Cobham died on the 6th of March in 97, and that George Carey received the Lord Chamberlain's staff which his father had held, As a result, the Burbage Acting Company once again assumed their official title as the Lord Chamberlain's Men. It was in the following summer that the Isle of Dogs was performed, and on the 28th of July, the Lord Mayor and Aldermen urged that all public stage performances in and about be stayed because of their unchaste matters, lascivious devices, shifts of cozenage, and other ungodly practices. The Privy Council issued an edict that was extremely severe. Not only were the plays to be stopped, but the theaters were ordered torn down. And I'll skip through this. These were disjointed times for the players, and it is small wonder that they resorted to satire. Nash states explicitly in his introduction to Lenten Stuffe that he is writing a mock epic in revenge for his discomfiture over the authorship of the Isle of Dogs. He places his clue to the identity of his victim on the first page of the work when he calls his enemy, whose loud, bellowing, prodigious flaw of indignation had stirred up such wrath against him, a miller's thumb. He then makes identity clear, if such metaphoric usage can be made clearer, by a reference to the wardenship of the Cinque Ports, the office of which the Cobhams had held from the reign of Queen Mary. And so, yeah, she at this point, Alice is just piling it on. Nash remarks that when he first contemplated his project of revenge for his unhappy plight, he proposed to take for his subject the Cinque Ports of Kent and their keepers, but after much debating with himself, he at length determined to forego the subject. Much brain-tossing and breaking of my skull it cost me, but farewell it, and farewell the bailies of the Cinque Ports, whose primordiate Gnethilica was also a dropping out of my inkhorn, with the silver ore of their baronry by the William the Conqueror. And so, yeah, several, just reference on reference. Baron, William, Cinque Ports, like, yeah, that, I don't know, that's... The Cobham baronage was created by William the Conqueror, as readers of Holinshed's Chronicles may well have known, for Francis IX, who later became Lancaster Herald, wrote a detailed treatise on the Lord Cobhams, which was included in the second edition of the Chronicles. This treatise is noteworthy with historians because it was made famous, or infamous rather, by its excision from the second edition on order of the Privy Council. Nash is apparently writing at this point in his satire with tongue-in-cheek, for he does not abandon the bailies of the Cinque Ports as subject matter. He narrows the field to the most famous of the earlier Cobhams, the Lollard martyr, Sir John Oldcastle. Nash very carefully hides his satire on the Cobhams under a voluble discourse on the city of Yarmouth, the home of the Red Herring. So where Nash flees to is actually the home of the Red Herring, where people would get... Alright. He praises the hospitality of the city in sheltering him from the tempest recently stirred up by the turning of the Isle of Dogs from a comedy to a tragedy, and the troublesome stir which happened about it. And after a lengthy description of the early history of Yarmouth, in which he teases his readers with the coming satire, the better to whet your appetites to taste of such dainty dish as the red herring. So there you go. Nash is saying red herring already. Nash begins his mock epic by comparing it with older models, just as Homer's Song of the Mice and Frogs, or certain of Ovid's satires, or the mockery of Skelton, Gaskin, or Spenser, took the form of the beast fable. So too is his satire to be garbed in animal imagery. He will choose, he declares, the legend of a fish for his story. The mock epic proper begins with the description of the red herring as a legate of peace. If he comes near a place where there are trials of life and death, where that hangman and bowling is, the herring flees the place forever. The Scottish jockeys frighten the herrings out of Scotland, Nash relates, by their foul ill feud among their secretaries and servitors. Even the least informed reader of Nash's satire should be able to see at this point that the writer has left the zoological realm of fish and has entered the political realm of man. And a 20th century reader who has explored English history of the 16th century will not miss the apparent reference in this remark to recent Elizabethan and Scottish affairs. To fully comprehend Nash's satire, however, the reader must know something concerning Lord Cobham's role in those historic affairs, and this information must be gleaned from primary sources. William Brooke, 7th Lord of Cobham, played an active role in the machinations of the adherents of the Queen of Scots in the earlier part of Elizabeth's reign. Both Lord Cobham and his wife Frances befriended the imprisoned Mary Stuart, while she was in the care of Earl of Shrewsbury. Even more important, I think, is the fact that Lord Cobham was involved with treasonable activities of the dissident Catholic lords in Elizabeth's reign, and his bungling in the Ridolfi plot led to the arrest of the Earls of Pembroke and Southampton, and led ultimately to the execution of the Duke of Norfolk. Pause real quick. Yeah, the Ridolfi plot. That's an interesting cast of characters.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the Rodolphi plot.
I'm not either, to be quite honest, but...
Yeah, Pembroke and Southampton already stick out as far as, like, interesting players.
Yeah, like, who's the Earl of Pembroke right there?
In 71? I don't know.
Same guy. That's Mary's husband.
Yeah, I forget his name, though.
Yeah, Herbert. Henry Herbert.
There you go, yeah.
Which maybe I'm talking out of my butt, but I'm pretty sure that's Henry Herbert by 71.
Does his dad also hold the title beforehand, do you know? Is it within the family, or does it switch families? Is the important part.
Yes, I want to say, but not for long.
Okay.
He's only, like, the second or third, but I may be mixing up with Stanley's. But also, yeah, Southampton. That's Southampton's dad. That's Archibald Risley. It's not Archibald. I couldn't remember his first name. William Henry. Those are good guesses. We're gonna stick with Archibald Risley. Henry Risley's father. Real name. But yeah. So Pembroke and Southampton, and then who's the Duke of Norfolk? That's Thomas Howard, who's like, I don't know, maybe one of the most powerful men in England's history to some extent. But yeah, this is all kind of our Shakespeare authorship candidate crowd. This is all that courtly crowd. But it's fascinating that those are names that, like, they're being arrested because they're trying to overtake the Queen. But it's like, those are names that we think of being as super close to the Queen, right? But, like, yeah, how close is the Queen really to these people? Trying to understand, Elizabeth's importance and all this, her relations and all this, what her stance and posture is. That's going to take years of research, and I haven't even gotten to that. Okay. The involvement with the affairs of the Queen of Scots and Duke of Norfolk, which extended with Lord Cobham's turn-and-tail-run tactics. So there you go, coward. Which, turn-and-tail and run tactics, that's exactly what Falstaff does whenever he gets pranked by Hal. Upon hope of pardon discovered all he knew therein, apparently lies behind Nash's remarks about the squeamish Harians who fled from the trials of life and death. With this contemporary reference made and his victim identified, or at least made identifiable to those in the know, the satirist leaves the contemporary Harians and begins his story of the adventure of the famous ancestral Cobb. Nash insists that the essence of his tale is to be the terrible stench which the great red herring, the king of fish, made when broiled for the Pope. The linguistic texture thickens here, for Nash is playing with language and its wealth of connotations, as he so frequently does. In addition to the meaning of Cobb as miller's thumb, the definition of the word as a great man or rich miser is used. They were rich cobs, you must rate them, and of them all cobbing country choughs, which they make their bellies and their bags, their gods are called rich cobs. This meaning of cob had been in derisive usage since the days of Hockleave. The etymology of the word relates to the Frisian or Dutch kob, meaning top or head. Thus, in his usage, Nash can depend upon connotations for both man and fish. We know also that the term herring cob means not only the head of a herring, but in addition, a stupid fellow. And the term is related to cod's head, or the sea fish, Gadus morus, the herring cod. Nash's choice of the red herring, the king of herrings, the chimera monstrosa, is gross but witty in view in the Oldcastle satire, because the red herring acquires its color from being cured with smoke. In its natural state, the herring is indeed a white fish. Nash continues his little allegory by relating how the king of fish was cooked for the Pope's table, and how the odor that it created was unendurable. The fire had not pursed it, but it being a sweaty loggerhead, greasy souter, in dungeon in his pocket a 12 month, stunk so over the Pope's palace that not a scullion but cried, Pho! And those at which the first flocked the fastest about it now fled the most from it, and sought more to rid their hands of it than before they sought to bless their hands with it. With much stopping of their noses between two dishes, they stewed it and served it up. This seems a meaningless fable created by Nash's peculiar imagination, until the reader, as I think he was meant to do, places the allegory in retrospection with the Oldcastle legend. The story of the Lollard martyr had become a point of controversy in the 16th century. William Tinsdale's account of the trial and death of Oldcastle, called The Book of Thorpe, was ordered burned in 1531, and Sir Thomas More decried the falsity of the work. He showeth himself a false liar in his rehearsal of the matter. But More's ridicule was no deterrent of John Bale, who expended Tinsdale's account of Oldcastle's trial into a brawling attack upon the beastly blockheads, these bloody belly gods, who with their unsavory interrogations had put an innocent lamb to death. The language of the 15th century chroniclers, who had found Oldcastle's conduct abhorrent, to them he was behemoth, leviathan, faithless knight, perfidious, follower of Wycliffe, satellite of Satan, etc., was turned by the pensmen of the new faith with triple invective upon the prelates who had condemned the rebel. Bale's brief chronicle was printed 3 times within 4 years, and it seems to have been widely distributed in England, though the author was residing in Basel. Bale's torrent of abuse continued to flow for the first English edition, John Fox's Acts and Monuments of the Church. The martyrologist renewed the attack upon the Catholic clergy with energy. He noted in flamboyant language the exceeding pride, ambition, simony, avarice, hypocrisy, whoredom, body, yakety, generally not niceness. And he defended Oldcastle, that valiant captain and hardy gentleman, against the charge of treason. So, I think what Alice is ultimately getting at here is that, theoretically, by Shakespeare's time, Oldcastle should be something of like a kind of hero figure. Yeah, it totally makes sense in the 1400s, like, when you're still this totally Catholic place, like, no bad, poopy Oldcastle, but probably from Henry VIII onwards, like, that should be shifting, and then such that by the 1560s and 70s, they're like, nah, this guy was awesome, and he stood up against, and he gets that sort of Richard Burton, Thomas Becket sort of vibe to him. No, I don't listen to the king, I only listen to the one king, just that's that
touchdown.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like that's the real Sir John Oldcastle. So like, why?
Yeah, a lot of good nationalistic stuff to latch on to there, obviously.
Why would Shakespeare and all these guys be making fun of him? And maybe this is some of the stuff that makes people say, Shakespeare must be a Catholic. He's making fun of this guy that rebelled against Catholics. But, like, nah, dude, like, that's not what this is about, clearly.
Yeah, you're not really, getting much of that reading from it. You're just kind of getting this, like, fun foil sort of side character, not like, oh, if you're like, this is how it's going to portray out. Or, maybe I'm totally wrong. I haven't read enough Henry in 4 and 5 to make that call.
But, like, no, you're totally right, because, like, at the end of the day, like, all the good characters are Protestant figures. Like, this isn't some Catholic anti-Protestant text. None of these are. I'm not going to sit here and say it's some, anti-Catholic text either necessarily, but, like, that's not what this is about. Like, clearly this is allegory, and that is why this Oldcastle character is shifted. It's not like, oh, let's really flip that whole hero thing on its head, and, this isn't a commentary on Lollardism. This isn't a commentary on Sir John Oldcastle. This is all a way of just using a vehicle to take pot shots at William Brooke and his people. And I want to say that this needs to be looked into further, because if we fast forward all the way up to, 1607, 8, 9, somewhere around there, we get a little play that gets printed called the Yorkshire Tragedy, or A Yorkshire Tragedy. Which nowadays people say, oh, that's written by Thomas Middleton. But when it was printed in 1607, it was printed as by William Shakespeare. A Yorkshire Tragedy is by William Shakespeare. But here's the thing. as far as we know, Shakespeare has 0 domestic tragedies. Like, all of his tragedies are courtly tragedies. They're not random people out in the backwoods of England. Yorkshire Tragedy is about a dude that gets mad at his wife and kills his wife and his kids. Like, and this was a true story. And so this is like, shout out to Fargo. Well, wouldn't you know, the guy that this is all loosely based on is a dude named Walter Caverly, who is like the adopted foster son of William Brooke, Lord Cobham. And so what's going on there? Don't know. And remember, the Yorkshire Tragedy stuff can go and tie into Pericles, because those are both supposed to be pamphlets being written by George Wilkins, which Yorkshire Tragedy it's a play built on this pamphlet, and Pericles is a play built on a pamphlet, and so it goes in the whole George Wilkins thing, and bloody yakety. So this isn't just, stuck in 1595, 6, or 7. I want to say that if we try and find this earlier, you will find it, but I think Alice's point is that it's going to be harder to find out, just because it's exploding on the scene here in 1596, 1597, because of Cecil versus, anybody else. Robert Cecil versus, Essex and anybody else. Also because this whole thing where the Lord Chamberlain dies, we get a new figure in William Brooke into that Lord Chamberlain's position. Everything's starting to look politically sketchy. And, maybe this is a good argument for these mainstream Stratfordian types. It's like, no, that's exactly what people of a playwright company would write when, their play company is going to get merged by some rich dude out with some other rich dude. This is what writers do. Maybe, sure. But, yeah, I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. Like, these are attacks on attacks on attacks. A lot of thoughts by Nash especially, but she'll go and she'll show Johnson too, and we can probably call it here, folks. This goes on for another 30 pages or something like that. Or sorry, it's another 10 pages, but it's a 20-ish page essay. I'll let you guys go check it out yourself. I really, really highly recommend checking it out, but it can be a little dense, and so maybe briefly, go check out a wiki page of Sir John Oldcastle, wiki page of Thomas Nash, wiki page of Lord Cobham, William Brooke. Kind of get, refresh yourself on some of that, and then come check this out, and you'll be like, okay.
And to bring it back to some of the beginning, who was the person who died of eating pickled herring? Was it Green? And with so many of these guys, we only get their biography from themselves, and that was some of the bizarre stuff that we went on through in the expanded authorship question.
Yep.
Who do we get the info? Who's the one who says that Green ate that stuff?
Nash.
Yeah, and so
Nash himself later is quoted to have also died from herring. Apparently, maybe it's even in this essay. But I want to say that it's Johnson that says that about Nash.
And what's funny is I think one of our commenters also commented way back on the Nashe Dekker video, because they even kind of bring it up that this red herring thing goes back to this like Frisian Danish sort of tradition or whatever, right? And this one commenter, because we posited that Thomas Nash kind of becomes Thomas Dekker.
Yeah.
Not only because the word, or the word Thomas literally means twin, and we were like, oh, that's kind of funny that their styles are the same, so they're kind of twins. But then I was like, I think someone else even says that Dekker was a slightly more refined Nash or something like that.
Yes,
so it's almost like
Don
Nash.
Murphy, yeah.
So Nash is the wood, and then Dekker becomes, the treated wood or the actual used wood. But even one of our commenters was like, yeah, Dekker is a very common, Danish word, or I forget exactly what it is.
Yeah, Dutch,
there you go. So it's a very common word for covering or wood covering.
Scholars think that he's the son of a Dutch immigrant or a Dutch immigrant himself, which... Sure. Whatever.
So it's like Thomas Nash aged too much Dutchness and then became like Thomas Dekker. It's a lot of weird wordplay that you can kind of infer from this, and which is the sort of phenomenon we were kind of referring to at the beginning.
Absolutely, and going along with that, like maybe there's not many Dekker plays that still get the nice little if you have any of the Mermaid. This is a thing of 4 plays, but Mermaid has little solo plays. and the New Mermaids edition. Most of their Deckers are Dekker writing with somebody else. There aren't many plays out there that, yeah, that's Dekker and only Dekker, and the ones that are usually bound up in his, you gotta go get the Dekker collection or something. It's not gonna be on its own. But the one Dekker play that is on its own that you can go get that everybody references, and I told 6 Days Theater in our comments, yeah, go check this one out, is the Shoemaker's Holiday. A.k.a. the Gentleman's Craft, which this one's, I think, listed in the Henslow Diary, and it's right around 1600. But it's this rompy stompy comedy. It reads a lot like Taming of the Shrew, actually. But the main character is a Dutch cobbler, or a Dutch shoemaker. And the whole time he's talking in this ridiculous caricature accent. If you remember some of these movies from the 50s, like these westerns, they'll sometimes have these really Germanic or Dutchy characters with these like just ridiculous cartoon, offensively cartoonish accents. But that's what Dekker does in that play, and people, because of that, because of his name, like just pretty much those two things, maybe some little minor references here and there. Yeah, dude's Dutch, and it's like, guys, like if you're a Dutch person, I think you don't write something like that, right? Like that. Like, at least from our modern sensibilities.
It's like a little too tongue-in-cheek and a little too on the nose or something, about it all.
So they talk like this.
And hog and dog, or something,
and it's actually a fantastic play, and I
it
love that.
reminds me of, like, there's the Adult Swim, like, little commercial that they had. It was totally fake, but they've got some little planet that rotates, and they got some, like, little, quote, white-looking people, and they're like, we'll celebrate our differences, and then it rotates, and it shows, like, people obviously in sombreros, and, like, burritos, chimichanga, it'd be something like, someone writing in English, like, my name's John Jose, and then, they write in a super, like, broken English.
This is only
Hispanic,
funny to the people of the central, non-marginal, like, this... Dutch people would not like that.
It's not going to come off unless they're already well versed in English to kind of go back between and sort of make those references. Otherwise, it's going to be
to be fair, like that was a trope that was used probably up into our childhood, but is no longer an okay trope, right? Like, what was it? Ed and Eddie had that character Rolf. Oh, I'm a Rolf, and I talk like this, and
I barely remember what he looks like, but
blue hair. He's really skinny. He had a turtleneck, and he always had like a cow or something. I don't know. It's like, it's offensive now. Like, it's like, I don't even know if people find that funny anymore. But like, it's totally that vibe that like it's there to be offensively funny. But that said, maybe that's our modern sensibilities being placed on it. But I think that's maybe where some of the Dutch stuff comes from. But yeah, it's not much. That said, we're starting to
tangent digress.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good sign that we've hit the blitz. We've hit our hour mark here. So maybe we'll call it here, folks. Please go check out this essay yourself. Start trying to piece together what is happening with the Lord Cobham situation. How long is this happening? Is it other people? Is he like the key figure, or is he just another part of some anti-theater faction or anti-writer faction? That's still up for determination. There's maybe another essay that's similar to this, but not exactly related, that we may go to in a future video. And that one maybe links some of the earlier years. So this is starting in 1596-ish. That's maybe talking about 93 or 4. So maybe we'll go into that one about Anthony Munday and the authorship of Sir Thomas More, actually. That said,
make sure you check out our Patreon. We got exclusive videos on there. We're gonna post our red herring recipe on there, like we did our butterbeer one, and just for the $5 only, you'll get to join pretty much our Discord for a lifetime. You don't, just do it one time if you don't want just the videos, and come join the discussion.
I'm trying
contribute
to dump
to the all the
my
essays
thoughts and notes anytime I read something. Usually I just get out my phone. I'm like, hey Brady, I found blah 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 blah, and in the last week or two, Brady's told me, like, hey, loved your thoughts, put them onto Discord. that's for the world to see. That's not just for me. Let's have it there for documentation. So anybody that joins up on this Discord server, you got all my notes. You're welcome to put your notes.
If you want to leave
We'll
YouTube comments all day, well, here you go. Yeah, just come on in. Yeah, and just start riffing back between us, and let's
absolutely
compare more notes. Yeah, let's keep purifying all these theories and all this research, and I guess come check out our Patreon. All the links down below, and I guess we'll end it on that note. So good evening, good night, wherever you are.
Yeah,
and as always, Nullius in Verba.